TSA agent can do nothing that you can't do. So if you can't grope a stranger and you go to prison, if anybody at the airport gropes a stranger and he pretends he's allowed to because he belongs to the government, he should be personally liable and suffer the consequences. It is a shame that our government here in Texas didn't stand up stronger against the TSA. But let me tell you, there is another vehicle, and it's going to be used ultimately, and they're starting to use it, and that is nullification. The nullification has not been used throughout our history, but it was understood, it was assumed to be a proper procedure where the states just ignore the feds when they come in and try to enforce illegal laws. But there are 2 states now, I believe it's Virginia and Arizona, they have passed in a way a nullification law about not supporting the military when they come in under the National Defense Authorization Act and arrest an American citizen, that they will not participate in those arrests. Of course, there is still this danger of how many federal policemen are carrying guns now. Before the TSA, I had a number, it was close to 100,000, so it must be much bigger now. As far as I'm concerned, under the way the Constitution was written, there was not to be any national police force. There was to be a defense force defending against enemies, but not to have a national police force coming in. But 100,000 plus now who come in to enforce regulations that are technically illegal, that all should be canceled out. We say no more of this. We want to take care of our own business and get the feds out of our lives and out of our Everybody knows that we're in an economic crisis, a lot worse in other places than Texas. And one time a few months ago, somebody asked me in the media, they said, who are you running against? And what one individual are you running against? I think they wanted me to say, you know, that 100% of our problems came from Obama, and I didn't yield to their temptation to say that, even though he's responsible for an awful lot of mess we have. No, I said, the one individual that I'm running against is Keynes. And some people understood it, and some people didn't understand it. But guess what? I'm getting to debate Keynes through his apostle, Paul Krugman. And that is an important subject. A true revolution has to be ideological. Revolutions can be violent and they can overthrow a government and nothing really improved. An ideologically positive revolution is what is necessary. And that's what we have going in this country. It is really very positive. The groundwork has been laid, just as the groundwork was laid before our first revolution, and there was a clear understanding about what freedom was all about, and what sound money was all about, and that's why they wrote a good document, the best probably in the world, although it was obviously flawed because we ended up not living up to that document. But at least there was an intellectual movement before that, as there has been now for several decades. But what I have noticed, since I've been involved in this since the 1970s, what I have noticed in the last 5 years, all of a sudden the revolution has gone mainstream. The people are waking up. And they're understanding, that the Keynesian argument, the big government argument, is we get into trouble, which they recognize that, we spend too much, we borrow too much, we regulate too much, we print too much, and then we get into a predictable crisis. And what do they say? Well, we haven't spent enough, we haven't borrowed enough, we haven't printed enough money. Then they wonder why the solution hasn't come. I believe and I'm convinced by free market economics that wealth comes from work and savings. therefore you don't want the government to spend our resources, whether it's direct taxation or indirect through the dilution value of your money. So my suggestion in our first year will be to cut the budget in real terms by $1 trillion. In some ways, I empathize a little bit with Paul Ryan because he is offering token cuts over the proposed increases over the next 10 years, and he gets nothing but grief that he's going to destroy everybody because he's made these cuts. But he hasn't really made any cuts. The budget is to go up about $10 trillion automatically over the next 10 years. So if you cut $2 trillion out of the proposed increase and you still spend an additional $8 trillion, there are no cuts whatsoever. So this is a pretense. So you have to cut. And you say, people get worried. Where are you going to cut $1 trillion? Where's the budget? What will happen? I said, well, we're not cutting the spending. We're just deciding the people can spend the $1 trillion, not the bureaucrats and the politicians. Still worry, and they believe that this will make our economy weaker if the government isn't spending this money. But that is not true, because obviously the people are going to spend their money more wisely. But in order to cut, I don't believe in this idea, although we talk about it and occasionally we have legislation that I give token support for, and that is get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse, as if it's the wastefulness of the government program. No, it's the government program per se. It's the taxing program of the government per se. It's the policy. It's the policy that has to change. This entitlement mentality and this foreign policy has to change. That's what we're talking about. There's no reason in the world why we shouldn't be able to bring people together on foreign expenditures. Left, right, center, independents, progressives, whatever. We ought to be able to come together because we're running out of money, the people are suffering, and we don't need to bleed ourselves anymore by spending more money overseas. But people will say, well, who's going to be the policeman of the world? Who's going to do this and that? And who's going to do the nation building? I would say, not the USA. We don't need this foreign policy that has been around for many, many years. It has actually gotten much words. It's been endorsed by Republicans and Democrats. It's the foreign policy of interventionism, of trying to tell other people what to do. But just go back, all the way back to the year 2000. How do you think the Republicans did a good job on electing a president on a foreign policy that said no nation building, no policing of the world, and have a humble foreign policy? It hasn't been a very wise foreign policy, and it hasn't been a fair trade-off. We lost 3,000 people on 9/11. We went the wrong way. The American people got immediately punished by having the Fourth Amendment repealed and having passed the Patriot Act. But how much more sacrifice did we participate in? Over 8,000 Americans have died. 42,000 Americans have come back with serious problems and injuries and amputations. Hundreds of thousands looking for help for psychological reasons, post-traumatic stress syndrome and head injuries, and they're not even getting their help. How much more of this payback can we afford? I would say that we have to wake up and understand foreign policy and understand the warning of the CIA and the Defense Department and other intellectuals saying, you know, if you get in their face and you occupy their country, why don't you think about it? What would it be like in Texas if China put their ships offshore and put their troops on our land? We would not be very happy. So this is a place where we ought to come together and join and stop spending. I don't happen to advocate cutting spending for children or adults. We've conditioned so many to be so dependent. It's a poor system. There's a much better way, but there's a way to wean ourselves off. But if we don't clean up this mess, if we don't cut real spending, if we don't restore sound money and free up the marketplace and come to a sensible agreement on foreign policy, this thing is going to end badly. The money is going to be destroyed, and that means high interest rates, higher cost of living, and everybody's going to suffer. There will be the more money you print to send it out to help people with medical care, the worse it will be. In the old days, they had gold and silver. Now, the more you spend, the more debt you have, the more assets, the more money they print. It's a suicidal course. It won't work, and we're approaching that end. And the government lies to us about the amount of unemployment, and they lie to us about the amount of destruction of the currency. People in the middle class are getting poorer. The country is shrinking in size as far as middle class goes. There's not been really significant economic growth since the year 2000. And people know it. They know there's something wrong, but you cannot produce wealth by the Federal Reserve creating money. And when they do it in secret, guess what? The special interests get the benefits, the ones that have already been benefiting. So when the crisis hits, the Congress and the Federal Reserve rushes to bail out Wall Streets and the banks and the Goldman Sachs of the world. The Fed, like I say, is a facilitator. The Fed will end when we restore liberty in this country and when we restore the rule of law and believe in our Constitution. There is no authority for a central bank nor paper money in our Constitution. But the basic thing that we have to understand is, what is personal liberty all about? We know what Jefferson thought about it. It was a God-given right to our life and our liberty, and it should be a God-given right to keep everything we earn. Ago, approximately, freedom was chopped up into two pieces, and because it's divided, it gets whittled away, and that's why we're in this mess. But freedom for the individual means that you have personal liberty. You have your religious liberties, you have your intellectual liberties, but you also should have your liberty to run your personal lives as you want to run your personal lives. Endorse this very, very extreme view, and I saw a sign here today, this extreme view that you ought to have the right to drink raw milk if you want. But the problem with this is, one side protected social liberties, the other side tried to protect economic liberties. Neither side have done a very good job. But the freedom movement is now saying, we really want to protect economic liberty. We really wanted to protect personal liberty. We need to put it back together. And guess what happened? All of a sudden you bring people together. Not because we have the same religious views, not because we want to read the same books, and not because we want to practice our social lifestyles the same. Matter of fact, it's exactly the opposite. We come together because we want to protect our freedom of choice, so we should come together for those reasons. In November, but we do know what is happening in the country and how people are waking up and how many people now endorse the principles of liberty. And like I have said so many times, that, you know, an idea whose time has come cannot be stopped by armies or by the politicians. There is every reason to be optimistic about the way things are going, but not to be complacent. To be complacent means that we wouldn't be here, and we wouldn't be concerned. We wouldn't be trying to get Ted in there to help Rand, and all these things. So there's reason to be optimistic, but it's ideology that is important. The one individual can't do it. You have to